Norwich can claim to be one of the most scholarly cities in England, with 2 universities, one of the earliest public schools, the most popular library in Britain, plus many other places where formal and informal learning can take place. This presentation looks at some of the interesting sites and buildings associated with learning over the centuries. These are all places that you should be able to see easily from the public highway. I'm starting with academic schools. The Great Hospital was founded in 1249 by Bishop Walter de Suffield to provide care for poor aged priests and sick and hungry paupers. 30 beds were earmarked in the west end of the church for the sick poor, and 13 paupers were to be fed at the hospital gates each day. Over the centuries, the Great Hospital has expanded into a large sheltered housing complex. The foundation also included poor scholars. Bright but poor boys were given the chance to train as choristers or even to enter the priesthood. An early school which has survived to the present day is the independent Norwich School, formerly King Edward VI Grammar School, housed mainly in the Cathedral Close. It is one of the oldest schools in Britain and was established in 1096 by Herbert de Lozinger, 1st Bishop of Norwich. Initially, the school was for the instruction of 90 sons of Norwich citizens, but now has over 1,000 pupils and became co-educational in 1994. It is ranked as one of the foremost schools in Britain. Old Norwicensians include Lord Nelson and several members of the Norwich School of Painters, whose works can be seen in Norwich Castle Museum and Art Gallery. The movement's founder, John Crome, also taught art at the school. The school occupies a range of historic buildings in the Cathedral Close. One of the most distinctive is the former Chantry Chapel, purchased in 1550. The chapel was founded in 1316 by John Salmon, Bishop of Norwich. The upper floor served as a chantry where masses were said for the soul of the founder. The basement was used as a charnel house where the bodies and bones of the dead were deposited. This was a regular occurrence. When graveyards were full, the bones would be disinterred and stored in charnel houses, awaiting the resurrection on the Day of Judgment. The round windows were where families could look into the charnel house to see the remains of their relatives. From 1551, the chapel was used as the main schoolroom until the 19th century, and today the building is the school chapel. The Brackendale School was founded in 1821 to, I quote, educate a limited number of young gentlemen between the ages of 8 to 16. It offered maths, history, geography, English, Latin, French, Italian, Greek, and if required, Turkish. In 1902, it was amalgamated on the Brackendale site with the Paragon House School from Boardman House in Earlham Road. The school closed in the 1990s. The building is now occupied by Old School Court retirement flats. Famous pupils include R.H. Mottram, who was a major author in the first half of the 20th century. He was also Lord Mayor of Norwich and a key figure in the early years of the Norwich Society. Another old boy who had a major impact on Norwich was the architect George Skipper, who built the Royal Arcade and Surrey House, home of the Marble Hall, amongst many other major buildings. A substantial new book on Skipper's work has recently been published and is available from Gerald's. This 18th century building in St Giles once housed the Norwich High School for Boys, which was founded in 1910 by Jeremiah George Chapman. The school started with 80 boys in St Giles House, but when the numbers grew, Mr Chapman built a new school building on an adjoining site. During the Second World War, the school moved out of Norwich to Langley Park, near Loddon, and is now known as the Langley School. Oscar winner and star of over 100 feature films, Sir John Mills, went to school here from 1920. He was badly bullied at first, but rallied and finally enjoyed his time there. Girls had to wait several centuries before their educational needs were considered. The Model School for Girls first opened in Norwich way back in 1708, at a time when education was not compulsory, and especially not for girls. It was established along with 8 other city charity schools, illustrating how Norwich was helping to lead the way when it came to educating its young people, at a time when many couldn't read or write. By 1843, there were about 400 girls attending the pioneering school in St Andrews. Parents had to pay for some of the school fees, and this was topped up by donations from charity groups in the city. In the 19th century, the school expanded into this Tudor merchant's house in St Andrews Street. It was built as a house in the 15th century and owned by merchant Francis Rugg, MP for Norwich, sheriff in 1572 and mayor in 1598 and 1602. What you see now is just one bay of the original 5-bay house. The school moved out in 1930. The Girls' Day School Company, now the Girls' Day School Trust, was formed in 1872 to provide affordable day school education for girls throughout the country. Its motto remains, "Norwich now no more a fountain sealed." Norwich's High School for Girls was founded in 1875, making it the first girls' public day school trust school outside London. From 1876 to 1939, the school was housed in the Assembly House. Built by Thomas Ivory in 1755, the Assembly House on Theatre Street was an elegant venue for society gatherings. Madame Tussaud exhibited waxworks here, and the composer Franz Liszt gave a concert recital in 1840. In 1857, Frank Nevers established a ballroom for regular high society balls in the West Wing, which was later used as a cinema. The Jane Austen College was founded in 2014. It occupies part of the old Howlett and White Limited, later Norvik shoe factory in St George's Street. The building was designed by prolific Norwich architect Edward Boardman in 1876 and extended in 1894. The Isaac Newton Sixth Form School was set up in 2018 and specialises in mathematics and science. The school occupies the former Norwich Fire Station in Bethel Street, which is Grade 2 listed. Built in 1932, it forms an impressive group with the nearby City Hall and police station, also built in the 1930s. The charming weather vane proclaims the building's former function. So far, we have looked at schools occupying buildings converted from their original purpose. In the 19th century, dedicated buildings were created for learning. The Coleman family were industrial philanthropists. They built good quality workers' housing and provided schools, a library, dispensary, savings bank, athletics ground, allotments, a works kitchen, and the first industrial nurse in the UK. The Brackendale Conservation Area contains 2 school buildings erected by Colemans on Carrow Hill for the children of their employees. The first was built in 1864, the second adjoining building in 1872 with an extension a year later. These buildings are good examples of 19th century school architecture. The right-hand building is constructed in high-quality knapped flint in keeping with the vernacular tradition. They have interesting decorative detailing and both have slender glazed bell towers with slate roofs and weather vanes. One of the buildings has now been converted to office use, the other to residential accommodation. In the 21st century, several new schools were built in an exciting contemporary style. The Open Academy has been shortlisted for several architectural awards, including the Norwich Society's own Design Awards in 2013. Norwich is also home to a wide range of places for developing the performing arts. The Music House in King Street is thought to be the oldest surviving house in Norwich, with buildings starting in the early 12th century. It got its name during the Elizabethan period, when the city's official band of musicians practiced there. The Norwich Waits were a famous band of 5 musicians who all lived in King Street and were presented with their instruments by Queen Elizabeth I, who visited Norwich in 1578. In the 18th century, the building was purchased by Young, Crawshay and Young's, one of the city's big 4 breweries, as it was adjacent to their Crown Brewery, and it was used as a pub for the next 150 years. There is still a bar in the basement. Now known as Wensum Lodge, it offers County Council adult education programme. Sarah Glover was the daughter of a curate at St Lawrence's Church, St Benedict Street, and lived at 91 Pottergate. She developed the tonic solfa method of singing in the mid-19th century, later modified to form the tonic scale used today and immortalised in the song "Doe a Deer, a Female Deer" from The Sound of Music. With her sisters, she founded a school for gentlewomen in Black Boys Yard, Colgate, behind what is now the Merchants of Spice restaurant, where they specialised in teaching music using her methodology. The Assembly House's original purpose was, as already described, assembly rooms for social events. Dancing was one of the key social graces and leisure pastimes in the 18th, 19th, and indeed the 20th centuries, and much time was given to acquiring that skill. The following notice appeared in the Norwich Mercury on the 31st of August 1793. Dancing Academy. Mr. Nevere of London, wishing to establish his son in Norwich, and having been greatly encouraged by his friends to such an undertaking, begs leave to acquaint the ladies and gentlemen of this city and county that his son, Mr. F. Nevere, has just arrived from the Continent, where he has been for some time under the tuition of his uncle, Sir George Nevere, and intends opening an academy for young ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Nevere has not a doubt but that his son's assiduity in his profession will give perfect satisfaction to any lady or gentleman who may honour him with their support. The Assembly House has reinvented itself once again, as since 2017 it has taken on a new learning function as the Richard Hughes Cookery School. After World War II, ballroom dancing was at the height of its popularity, with regular dances at the Samson and Hercules and elsewhere. With so much emphasis on ballroom dancing, it was helpful if you knew the steps, and through the 1950s and 60s, a number of dance schools flourished in Norwich. One of the most popular, Norman's, started life at the Samson and Hercules, where Peter and Nancy Norman were hosts of wartime tea dances. They later moved to what is now the Yoga Tree in All Saints Green. This charming building was built as stables around 1895 and converted to upholstery works in the mid-20th century. The restoration of the Yoga Tree was the runner-up in the Norwich Society's Conservation Award in 2017. A rather sad relic of the craze for dance schools is the Dell Ballroom on Waggon and Horses Lane off Elm Hill. It was previously used by the Anglia Academy of Dancing. The garage, adjacent to Chapelfield Gardens, works with local and national partners to provide high-quality performing arts programming, participation, education and training for all ages, but has a particular focus on young people from all backgrounds. Stage 2 opened in 2016, just behind the Theatre Royal, and is the newest member of the Norwich Theatre family of venues. Again, it is a creative hub for people of all ages. It provides a fully equipped 120-seat studio theatre space, as well as rehearsal studios and training spaces. The National Centre for Writing promotes the written word through supporting writers and offering learning opportunities for people of all ages. It was launched in 2018, but started as the Writers' Centre in the early 2000s. It is housed in Dragon Hall in King Street, a medieval trading hall built about 1427 by a wealthy merchant called Robert Tops. This was not his house, but a business complex to display, store and sell Norfolk goods and imports from Europe and beyond. The River Wensum was a busy trading route via the River Yare to Great Yarmouth and the North Sea, and then to the Low Countries, Bruges, Antwerp, the German states and the world beyond. Dragon's Hall is now acknowledged as one of Norwich's medieval architectural gems. The Norwich Society of Artists was founded in 1803 by John Crome and Robert Ladbroke as a club where artists could meet to exchange ideas. Its aims were an inquiry into the rise, progress and present state of painting, architecture and sculpture, with a view to point out the best methods of study to attain the greater perfection in these arts. The group built up a collection of books, prints, casts and works of art by members, which was used as an academy. The Society held its first exhibition in 1805 in a large room at Sir Benjamin Wrench's Court off Little London Street. Exhibitions were held annually during Summer Assize Week, apart from a 2-year break in 1826-7. John Sell Cotman was also one of the early Norwich Society of Artists, but did not return to live in the city in 1806. He had his home and drawing school in the large Georgian house on Palace Plain from 1824 to 34. A large proportion of the Norwich Society members were drawing masters, as, like dancing, drawing and watercolour painting were social graces that well-to-do girls were supposed to exhibit. The Norwich School of Design was founded in 1845 by the artists and followers of the Norwich School of Painters to provide high-quality designers for local industry. It has evolved into Norwich University of the Arts, which aims to be the best specialist university for arts, design, architecture and media study in Europe. The newer campus is made up of 10 buildings and facilities in and around St George's Street in the centre of Norwich. The campus is characterised by the ultra-modern conversion of some of Norwich's most significant historic buildings. Here are some of them. Norwich Technical Institute building in St George's Street was built in 1899 and continues to house a large element of the university. It was built by the Corporation of the City of Norwich for a school of science and art and for technical instruction applicable to trades and manufactures. Eastgarth Photography Building off St George's Street is part of what remains of the medieval Blackfriars monastic complex, represented by St Andrew's and Blackfriars Halls. The garth is the green bit in the middle of monastic cloisters, which are attached to St Andrew's Hall. Between the 1920s and 1975, shoemakers were trained at what was then Norwich City College and Art School. The monastery off Earlham Hall is an early 18th century workshop and store, and in the 20th century housed a small-scale factory to train students. The building now houses Newer's Media Labs. Duke Street Lecture Theatre and Library was formerly the Norwich Board School, built in 1888 in the Queen Anne Revival style. Gunton's Building, St George's Street, was built in 1914 for Gunton's builders and plumbers merchants. Norwich architect Edward Boardman had more effect on the appearance of Norwich than perhaps any other architect. His name lives on in Boardman House on Elm Hill, the church rooms he designed along with the Congregational Chapel in 1879. In 2015, this building was imaginatively refurbished by Norwich University of the Arts to house the School of Architecture. This refurbishment won the Norwich Society's Conservation Design Award in 2017. The University of East Anglia was established in 1963 and is characterised by its many significant contemporary buildings, but its history includes some more traditional settings. A discreet metal plaque on No. 4 Cathedral Close stated that UEA began here in 1961. In October 1963, Earlham Hall and its gardens became the home of the newly opened University of East Anglia, housing the Vice-Chancellor and administration. The house dates to the late 16th century, with numerous later additions, including some in the 20th century by Edward Boardman. It now houses the UEA Law Department. Its refurbishment won the Norwich Society Design Award for Conservation in 2015. Earlham Hall was built in 1642 by Robert Houghton. By the 18th century, it was in the ownership of the Bacon family. From the late 18th to late 19th century, the house was rented to the Gurney family and was the home of John Gurney and his wife Catherine Bell. They had 13 children, including the bankers Samuel and Daniel Gurney, the social reformers Elizabeth Fry and Joseph John Gurney, and Louisa Hoare, the writer on education. The university then started commissioning contemporary buildings. The famous ziggurats were designed by Dennis Lasdon and opened as student accommodation in 1966. One of the most prestigious buildings on campus is the Sainsbury Centre for the Visual Arts, designed by Norman Foster in the mid-1970s. Its uncompromising modern style means that it is in demand as a futuristic film set. Film credits include acting as the new headquarters of the Avengers in Avengers Age of Ultron 2015. It also starred in Spider-Man Homecoming 2017. The Enterprise Centre provides an ultra-modern working, event and teaching space. The timber frame and straw cladding was specified to reduce its carbon footprint and promote the use of renewable materials. It is the largest exterior thatch building in Europe. It won the Norwich Society Design Award in 2017 and went on to win a Civic Voice Design Award in 2018. UEA is not the only educational establishment to commission cutting-edge contemporary buildings. The Creative Arts Building for City College is an impressive building inspired by Norfolk barns and soaring church walls. It includes many energy-saving devices and won one of the Norwich Society's Design Awards in 2015. Some of the foremost places of learning in Norwich are our museums. We are fortunate to have access to a range of world-class collections which started in the early 19th century. The eminent botanist James Edward Smith suggested the establishment of a Norwich Museum to supplement the book collection of the Norfolk and Norwich Literary Institution in the 1820s. The institution was housed in the Haymarket, and in 1825 the first Norwich Museum opened there. These premises were very modest, and in 1833 the first purpose-built museum was provided in Exchange Street and survives as part of Jarrold Stationers. This north end of Exchange Street was then known as Museum Street and subsequently Post Office Street. In 1883 the City Corporation acquired Norwich Castle. This was built in the early 12th century as a royal palace but then became the county jail. When the new jail was built on Mousehold Heath, the castle was converted into a museum which was opened in 1894 by the Duke and Duchess of York. During the 20th century, the new museums continued to provide more learning opportunities. Strangers' Hall is one of Norwich's oldest buildings, dating to 1320. Formerly the home of Sir Nicholas Southerton, Mayor of Norwich, who gave refuge to the strangers, who were cloth weavers from Holland and Belgium, who came over in the 16th century. In the 18th century, Strangers' Hall became the official lodging of the assize judges, who came to the city regularly to hear court cases. But by the 1890s, Strangers' Hall stood empty, neglected and derelict. In 1899, local solicitor Leonard Bolingbroke bought the building, saving it from demolition. He was a keen collector and furnished the house with his own antiques. In May 1900, he opened it to the public as a social history museum, one of the first of its kind in Britain. In 1922, he presented the museum and the contents to the City of Norwich. The Museum of Norwich and the Bridewell is housed in an early merchant's house built in 1370. It has had a varied history as a bridewell or prison for women and beggars from the 16th to the 19th centuries until the new city jail was built, and then a shoe factory. It was bought by the City Council in 1920 and turned into a museum of local industry. It now tells a wider story of the history of Norwich. The Shire Hall dates from the 1800s and was the centre for jurisdiction and administration for the county. The original Shire House was built on the Castle Mound in 1270. In 1821, William Wilkins won a competition to design a new Shire Hall at the base of the mound and also improve the jail. The jail and Shire Hall are linked to the castle by a tunnel used to take prisoners through to the courts from the prison. In 1988, the courts moved to a new site near the cathedral, and in 1999 the building became part of the Norfolk Museum Service and is now the Costume and Textile Study Centre. Over the centuries, Norwich has been at the forefront of library development. The availability of knowledge through books is key to a well-educated population. The earliest library is the Benedictine Priory Library, founded by Bishop Herbert de Losinga, which had 2,000 books by 1386. The modern cathedral library now houses some 8,000 volumes on a range of subjects including theology, literature, local history and travel. It is housed in an upper floor of the cloisters, which was renovated when the refectory was built in 2004. The buildings show all the scars of its long life, with repairs, insertions and additions. Norwich is a city of firsts. St Andrew's Hall was the site of the Norwich City Library. Founded in 1608, it was the first library to be established by a corporation in a corporately owned building outside London. The Norwich Subscription Library is one of the oldest subscription libraries in England. It was founded in 1784 and was also originally located in St Andrew's Hall. A subscription library, also known as a membership library or independent library, is a library that is financed by private funds, either from membership fees or endowments. Unlike a public library, access is often restricted to members, but access rights can also be given to non-members, such as students. The subscription library moved to Guildhall Hill in 1837. After over a century of service, the library closed in 1976 and the books were presented to the Norwich School. The building then housed an advice centre before becoming the library restaurant, unfortunately now closed. Norwich was the first city to adopt the 1850 Public Libraries Act, and in March 1857 the Norwich Free Library was opened on St Andrews. Towards the end of its life, the building was used as a shoe factory, and in 1963 it was demolished to give way to the new Central Library in Bethel Street. Demolition allowed the widening of St Andrews Street, and the corner site is currently occupied by British Telecom telephone exchange. The first City Council branch library was housed in one of the oldest buildings in Norwich, which started life as a leper hospital. By the early 14th century, there were 6 leper hospitals or Larzar houses outside the gates of Norwich. They were isolated, quasi-religious communities that had been set up to care for lepers who were regarded as suffering from a disease given as a judgment from God. Although lepers were required to be separated from the general community, their hospitals were at key points on the main approaches to the city to increase the likelihood of prayers and gifts from passer-by. The Larzar House on Sprowston Road is the oldest leper hospital, built between 1101 and 1119 and dedicated to St Mary Magdalene. It closed down after the Reformation in 1547 and was converted to farm buildings and cottages. It was saved from demolition in 1902 and presented to the city and served as a library from 1923 to 2003. In the early 20th century, the City Council built a series of local libraries as part of a big investment in social housing, of which Earlham Library, built in 1929, is a good example. Not all libraries rely on bricks and mortar. The Thorpe Branch Library off Thorpe Road now no longer exists, but before 1974 it was the main county reference library. It was housed in a number of interconnected prefabs in a little parcel of trees. After local government reorganisation in 1974, it became just an ordinary branch library, specialising in fiction, and soon afterwards closed altogether. The library is commemorated in the naming of Old Library Woods, which houses a small community library bookcase where people can donate and borrow books. A local support group looks after the site and has installed some charming sculptures created from felled trees. The Norwich Central Library, designed by Norwich City Council architect David Percival, was one of the most modern in the country when it was opened in the early 1960s. Unfortunately, it didn't have a long life as it was burned down on the 1st of August 1994. Its replacement, the Norfolk Millennium Library, is housed in a landmark building designed by Michael Hopkins and Partners and built as a Millennium project for the East of England. It was finished in October 2001 and is one of the most used libraries in the country. When the ambitious design was first mooted, many people thought that it would be too large and sit at odds with the other historic buildings surrounding it. But the building has become a well-used and much-loved community space, which complements the nearby medieval St Peter Mancroft and Guildhall and Art Deco City Hall. That concludes my talk, and I hope that you will agree that Norwich has always offered a wide range of excellent ways in which people can develop their knowledge and skills. The Norwich Society is a passionate supporter of Norwich. You can keep in touch with us through our website, Twitter, and our 2 Facebook pages. You can also view all our talks on a range of topics on our YouTube channel.